Hello one and all, welcome to another instalment from the channel that is Jono's Graveyard Jaunts. If you are enjoying the content of the channel so far, can I please ask you to like, subscribe and comment and hit the bell icon which lets you as the viewer know when I'm next uploading to YouTube. If we think about the evolution of the transport network, certainly in the UK, the canal and the railway infrastructure came first, as the early roads were literally just muddy tracks. In the 1840s in the UK, railways and roads were on an even keel in terms of development. However, the railways took over as they were considered to be far more flexible, efficient and a much quicker mode of transport than that of the canals. The first video I ever made for this channel was on Thomas Cook, who was known as the father of travel. And Thomas's first excursion was by rail from Loughborough to Leicester, and had it not been for the introduction and development of the railways, Thomas may never have gotten his business off the ground. I shall add a link in the description of both Thomas and Annie Cook, who was his daughter who worked in the business, in case you may want to view those videos. The person who features in today's video was known as the father of the railways. He was responsible for the development of the infrastructure and designed and built many locomotives, the most famous of which was the Rocket. The person who is the topic of today's video is a man by the name of George Stephenson. In today's video I shall visit the former grand home of George Stephenson, located in Chesterfield, Derbyshire, which is known as Tapton House. Sadly, this building has been recently sold and remains vacant to this day, and I know after having spoken to the local vicar who preaches at the church in Chesterfield, the residents are all very concerned about the building's future. I shall also visit the monument erected to George Stephenson, located at Chesterfield railway station, and finally I shall visit the vault where George Stephenson is laid to rest in the Holy Trinity Church in Chesterfield, which is not far from Tapton House where he resided. Now, George Stephenson was born on the 9th of June 1781 in Wylam, Northumberland, which is 9 miles, about 15 kilometres west of Newcastle upon Tyne. Now, the first map shows where the county of Northumberland sits in relation to the UK, and the second map shows where Wylam sits in relation to the county of Northumberland. Now, George Stephenson was the second child of Robert and Mabel Stephenson, neither of whom could read or write. Robert was the fireman for Wylam Colliery, pumping engine, earning a very low wage, so there was no money for schooling. At 17, George Stephenson became an engineman at the Water Road Pit in Newbury, nearby. George realised the value of education and paid to study at night school to learn to read, write and gain some experience and knowledge of arithmetic, and he was illiterate until the age of 18. And in 1801, he began to work at Black Callerton Colliery, south of Ponteland, as a brakesman, which was the controlling of the winding gear at the pit. In 1802, he married Frances Henderson and moved to Willington Quay, east of Newcastle. There he worked as a brakesman while they lived in a one-room cottage. And George made shoes and mended clocks to supplement his income at night after work. In 1815, aware of the explosions often caused in mines by naked flames, Stephenson began to experiment with a safety lamp that would burn in a gaseous atmosphere without causing an explosion. At the same time, the eminent scientist and Cornishman Humphrey Davey was also looking at the problem. And despite his lack of scientific knowledge, George Stephenson, by trial and error, devised a lamp in which the air entered via tiny holes through which the flames of the lamp could not pass. A month before Davey presented his design to the Royal Society, Stephenson demonstrated his own lamp to two witnesses by taking it down Killingworth Colliery and holding it in front of a fissure from which fire damp was issuing. Now, the two designs differed significantly. Davey's lamp was surrounded by a screen of gauze, whereas Stephenson's prototype lamp had a perforated plate contained in a glass cylinder. For his invention, Davey was awarded £2,000, while Stephenson was accused of stealing the idea from Davey, which he was not seen as an inadequate scientist who could not produce the lamp by an improved scientific method. Stephenson, having come from the northeast, spoke with a broad Northumberland accent and did not have the language of Parliament, quote-unquote, which made him seem lowly. Realising this, he made a point of educating his son Robert in a private school. He was taught to speak in standard English with a received pronunciation accent. It was due to this and their future dealings with the Parliament that it became clear that the authorities preferred to deal with Robert rather than George. A local committee of inquiry gathered in support of Stephenson, exonerated him, proved he had been working separately to create the Geordie lamp, and awarded him £1,000. But Davey and his supporters refused to accept their findings and would not see how an uneducated man such as Stephenson could come up with the solution he had. So this is Tapton House, the former home of the father of the railways, George Stephenson. It dates back to 1794. It's a Grade 2 star listed building and was originally built for a wealthy banker family called the Wilkinsons. Now, George Stephenson leased it off them. It's based in Tapton Park in Derbyshire in Chesterfield, and it's at the top of it. It's actually a beautiful location. The grounds are amazing. And sadly, this building is now up for sale. There was a bid put forward to turn it into a railway museum, you know, to celebrate the great man, and this would have been the obvious choice for it, but sadly it was rejected and it's now on the market. And it's just heartbreaking. I hope they don't do anything silly with it, but this is where the great man himself lived, George Stephenson. As I say, leased the property, and this is where he sadly passed away on the 12th of August 1848 at 67, having just married his housekeeper 7 months previously, and he died from pleurisy. So we're outside of Chesterfield railway station, and this is a bronze statue of George Stephenson that was unveiled in October of 2005. And in his right hand is locomotive number 1, and this is what we call a measuring compass, this triangular shaped object. And we'll just read what it says. George Stephenson, 1781 to 1848, locomotion, the conquest over space and time. So this is not far from Tapton House, where he lived and died. In 1833, a House of Commons committee found that Stephenson had equal claim to having invented the safety lamp, and Davey went to his grave believing that Stephenson had stolen his idea. The Stephenson lamp was almost used exclusively in the northeast of England, whereas the Davey lamp was used everywhere else. And this experience gave Stephenson a lifelong distrust of London-based theoretical scientific experts. So in terms of locomotives, in 1814 Stephenson constructed his first locomotive, known as the Blucher, for hauling coal at Killingworth Colliery near Newcastle. And in 1821 Stephenson was appointed as an engineer for constructing of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, which in turn opened in 1825 and was the first public railway. The following year, Stephenson was made an engineer for the Liverpool to Manchester Railway, and in October of 1829, the owners staged a competition at Rainhill to find the best kind of locomotive to pull heavy loads over long distances. And thousands came to watch this spectacle, and Stephenson's locomotive, the Rocket, was the winner, achieving a record speed of 36 miles per hour. The opening of the Stockton to Darlington Railway and the success of the Rocket stimulated the laying of railway lines and the construction of locomotives all over the country. And Stephenson in turn became an engineer on a number of these projects and was also consulted on the development of railways in Belgium and Spain. Stephenson died on the 12th of August 1848 in Chesterfield in Derbyshire. So we're at the amazing Holy Trinity Church in Chesterfield, which is a Grade 2 listed building, and I will show you the final resting place. We'll actually go to the plaque to mark the final resting place of George Stephenson, the father of the railways. Now, if we look at these beautiful stained glass windows, they were donated by his son Robert Stephenson for the church. And if I just zoom in on them, you can actually see the initials. You've got GS there. This is to denote George and Robert Stephenson. It's a beautiful window here. So this is the altar in Holy Trinity Church, and what we'll do is we'll go up to the altar and I'll show you the stone and the final resting place of George Stephenson. So this is the stone on the floor at the altar at Holy Trinity Church, and we can see the initials of George Stephenson, 1848. So if I just step back a bit, this is where his headstone is apparently. and the Reverend very graciously opened the church up for me to allow me access to show you this on video. So huge thanks to them. So my understanding is that George Stephenson basically died at 67. He got married 7 months previously, and he died at Tapton House in pleurisy on the 12th of August 1848. So as I say, if the church isn't open, guys, just email the Reverend or give her a call. She's really nice and supportive and helpful, and they'll let you into the church. So I just wanted to share this with you. So this is where the great man, known as the father of the railways, is buried. Now, in the church, there is another George Stephenson. There's a big a Victorian broken column to signify a life cut short, but that's spelt with a V rather than a PH. So don't misinterpret that as the final resting place of George Stephenson. There is a plaque at the bottom of that grave as well, so you can't get confused. But so the final resting place of the father of the railways, the great man himself, a really important person, and had it not been for him, the railways would have never been the same. Rest in peace, George. Thank you for all of your hard work in building an amazing railway infrastructure. George Stephenson understood and knew the value of education, and knew exactly by how much this could potentially enrich his life in terms of earnings and career prospects. And we all owe George Stephenson a debt of gratitude for not only being a very motivated and driven individual, but had it not been for him, the railways and its infrastructure may never have been the same. And that concludes the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment in the comment section below.